All right, everybody, welcome to Tea Talk with Jane, and I'm here today with Miss Terry Bean, and I am going to go ahead and read you her biography, and then she's going to take the floor and talk about her story. As I mentioned before in our class, Terry's brother, Jeff Wood's been on death row now for over 20 years, and she's here to talk about the system and her journey and his journey. And we also have some of his art to look at, which is pretty amazing because she actually gave us a chronology, which is different than what you saw with Julia. So I think you're going to really like it. All right, let's introduce Terry real quick. And here it is. Terry Bean is an educator for the Southwest Independent School District in San Antonio, which is very close to Uvalde, Texas, by the way, everybody. Currently teaching cybersecurity and computer science in a dual credit program. She first graduated from Texas A&M University, Kingsville in San Antonio with a Bachelor of Science degree with a focus of kinesiology, and education. She has also earned a master's degree in education with an emphasis on instructional technology from the American Intercontinental University. Terry spent several years as a varsity and sub-varsity coach, volleyball, basketball, track, soccer, and softball, before taking over as the science department chair at the Dali Independent School District. In addition to these exciting positions, she's also served as an athletic director for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Texas and has served on the Parks and Recreation Board for the city of Lampasas. Terry has been married to her husband, Stephen, for 29 years and is the proud parent of 4 wonderful and crazy young men, Nathan 27, Nicholas 26, Stephen 25, and Gavin 24, stair steps. All of them are pretty great kids. I happen to know this. Terry spends the majority of her free time dealing with criminal justice issues and lobbying for reform in the law of parties and capital punishment, prison conditions, and solitary confinement. She belongs to several human rights associations, including Amnesty International, the Texas Moratorium Network, the Texas Death Penalty Abolition Network. She also served as a board member on the campaign to end the death penalty and Students Against the Death Penalty. Terry helped her children start and build the organization Kids Against the Death Penalty, and is currently managing the Save Jeff Wood campaign. If you're interested in more information about Terry or work, please contact her at the following email address. And guys, I'm just going to write this email address in our chat box, or actually I'm going to put it in Slack because I don't think all of you will see it. I think it'll be easier to see, but just in case, it's mystrus@hotmail.com. All right, guys. So Terry, thank you for being here tonight, and go ahead and take it away. I'm going to just turn off my microphone, so there's not going to be any static or anything like that. And if you need anything, I'll be right here.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, good evening. I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting me to share my brother's story. I'm not sure how much Jane has actually told you about me, but my name is Terry Bean, and I am a family member of a Texas death row prisoner. I am here in an effort just to raise awareness about the injustice of the death penalty, the law of parties, and also to relay how these things affect family members of people who have been wrongfully sentenced to death. My brother, Jeff Wood, was convicted under the controversial law of parties, and he was convicted of murder even though he was not the shooter in the crime, and even though he was not even in the building when the murder took place. Further, Jeff had no knowledge that a murder would even take place because he was ignorant to the fact that his co-defendant was even carrying a weapon. The shooter in this particular crime, Daniel Renault, he's already paid the ultimate Texas price with his life, and he was executed by the state of Texas back in 2002. So my brother has been sitting on death row for over 25 years for a murder that he factually did not commit. Jeff is not a killer, nor is he anywhere close to being the worst of the worst. Yet he is and will forever be referred to as a convicted killer because that's what the courts and that's what our lawmakers allow him to be labeled as such. Personally, I find it rather disturbing that court members know beyond a shadow of a doubt that my brother was not even in the building when that murder took place. Yet, according to them, their hands are tied because they are, after all, following the law. So not only did my brother not kill anybody, he also did not plan to kill anybody. He did not conspire to kill anybody. So how can somebody who is factually innocent of murder, who didn't plan or conspire, be awaiting their own execution? And the answer to that is poorly written laws and cowardice, because most of our politicians, they care more about their careers than doing what is right. So my brother is just one of many who are factually innocent of murder, who await their own murder. Humberto Garza, Randy Halpern, and Juan Ramirez are but just a few more of the law of party cases that we have in Texas. Each of these men have their own degree of culpability, right? But none of these men committed murder. And the death penalty, it is supposed to be reserved for the worst of the absolute worst. Another law of parties case is Kenneth Foster. Unfortunately, Kenneth was granted clemency and his sentence was commuted just before his scheduled execution. But Kenneth is still serving life without the possibility of parole, which again is simply too harsh of a punishment for simply driving a car. Now, my brother, he has had 2 different execution dates and has literally come mere hours away from his own execution before he was given temporary stays. Currently, my brother is death eligible and could technically receive a death date at any time. And normally when I speak, I talk about the need for reform in the law of parties and what we need to do to make a positive change. But in keeping with kind of like the theme for the meeting today, I just want to talk to you about how this personally affects my family. I do consider myself to be a victim of this crime as well. And so are all of the other members of my family, which does include my brother's daughter, Paige, and her 2 kids, my brother's grandkid. It also includes my brother's friends. And so what would you do if your loved one or your best friend was sentenced to death for something that they honestly didn't do? How would you feel? There are simply not any words powerful enough to describe what my family and I have gone through. Since all this happened over 25 years ago, emotionally, I'm in that cell with my brother. And that cell is smaller than my bathroom. Literally, he is in solitary confinement and I'm there with him. He is there 24 hours a day. Since COVID has taken place, they're supposed to get an hour out of that cage every single day. Again, it's by themselves in this little tiny courtyard that's about the size of my dining room. But, you know, it's still outside and it's still outside of the cage. But since COVID and, you know, all of the restrictions, they're not getting this normal hour outside every day. And they're lucky to get it once a week. So again, like recently, they've been in their cell, you know, for 24 hours a day. Again, emotionally, I'm in that cell with him and I'm awaiting death myself every day. And don't even get me started on the toll that it's taking on us with the sheer amount of worry for our my brother's mental state because of the added restrictions and the torture with COVID. They didn't have visitations for almost 2 years. The mail there has slowed dramatically. You know, and of course they're with COVID restrictions, fingerprints and germs on the letters. And so it's taking a serious amount of time to even get regular correspondence with anybody. The Johnny bags that they get for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it's, you know, they're lucky to get a peanut butter sandwich and a hard-boiled egg like 3 times a day. And during COVID, this is what they're getting. Like my brother is sick of peanut butter and he's sick of hard-boiled eggs because that's what they're getting over and over and over for months at a time. They aren't getting regular showers. As a matter of fact, when I went to go visit my brother last week, it had been 12 days since he had a shower before that. And they've even gone over 20 days without a shower. Again, solitary confinement is not a joke. So our stress comes in many different forms and from all directions. So in addition to all of this craziness, we as family members have been chastised and we've been called names. We've had guns pulled out on us, you know, by the guards at the unit in Huntsville. We've had guns pulled on us by regular people on the street driving by in a truck. We've had people that have tried to run over us in their vehicles while we were peacefully protesting. We receive hate mail and messages, especially when our loved ones are plastered all over the news. And the average person just doesn't really take time to do the background research. And they wholeheartedly believe the lies and the mistruths that are spread across the media, and all they see is the title convicted murderer. And then we become the evil entities incapable of love or feelings or goodness. So make no mistake, we family members, we're also the monsters that they portray our loved ones to be. So, and as a result, and not just my family, but other family members of death row people, we've lost jobs, we've lost income. Some of us have had to move several times. Some of us regularly contemplate suicide. Some of us have attempted suicide. Other family members of death row prisoners rely heavily on drugs or alcohol. You really just can't imagine saying your final goodbyes to somebody and being absolutely powerless to stop it. So how can it not affect a person? And imagine being the child of one of these prisoners. I've personally myself had a couple of different breakdowns because of this whole process. I once even had to take, depression and anti-anxiety medication. And I hate to admit that, but I do have PTSD from coming so close to my brother's murder. They had to pull me out of the building kicking and screaming, and I swear I almost got arrested on the day, on the first execution date. It's what I thought would be my final goodbyes to him. And, there is just no words to describe the amount of torture that was. And I should still probably seek counseling, and I should probably still have a running prescription. However, we family members, we're on limited budgets because we come last. Anything extra that we can spare, it goes to our loved ones to try and ease their burden and ease their suffering. So we always put ourselves on the back burner. And again, the thing I worry about most with my brother is his mental state. Because again, the only thing that these men have to occupy their time is reading, listening to the radio, and the art and drawing that they do while they're in there. My brother is not one who uses his art for political purposes, like some of those men in there do. And they have some really great art, but he uses his as gifts for friends and for family and for pen pals. He doesn't consider himself to be an artist. He doesn't, just somebody who has a lot of time to learn to draw and to paint. I could really, really speak for hours about this, but, I would like to plea, with everybody. We're about to start lobbying again for the criminal justice reform coming up for this next legislative session. And, we really do need your help. As artists, you have a way of helping people see the full story and not just the blurb of mistruths that, are regularly seen on the evening news. You have the power to inspire people with your works, whether it's like a carefully designed meme or a photograph or a painting or a drawing or even a documentary. Your works have power to get people emotionally involved enough to want to do research into these cases and to want to help make a difference. We've made a lot of progress over the years, and we owe people like Jane, who's your instructor, and other photographers like John Holbrook or Carolina Plank and Oscar Silva. These people have graciously used their voice to promote justice. And so now is the time that we demand to our lawmakers that they need to initiate a fair and open dialogue about our state's capital punishment system and to address such issues as the risk of executing the innocent, the absorbent cost of the death penalty, and the biased and the arbitrary way in which the punishment is meted out, especially here in Texas. These lawmakers, they need to be urged to support alternatives that punish the truly guilty, but protect society without resorting to state killing. Further, they need to be made aware of the emotional toll that this is taking on all of us, friends and family members, and how it is negatively impacting our day-to-day life. Separately, our voices are faint, but together we are strong and we can make a difference. And therefore, your help would greatly be appreciated. So in closing, I guess I just wanted to relay the following message to you from my brother. And he says, let me read this really quickly. Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to a bit of my story. It has been a long and uphill battle for justice, and I would like to personally thank those of you who have been inspired enough to help make a difference. It's easy to forget about us in here, but we sure appreciate everything that you do for us. And I ask that you please pray for us daily and that you use your imagination and your creativity to help make some noise for us. I have every hope that you can find a way to help make a difference. I wish you all many successes in your upcoming lobbying efforts, and I pray that you all stay safe from COVID. So that is the message from my brother. So I am open to any questions that you might have about like the case or what we go through or anything to that degree.
One question is, I wanted to go ahead and get you to, I know we talked about not going too much into some things, but I really think the law of parties, so they'll understand it. Can you go a little bit more in depth on what the law of parties is and how that affects people that are charged under that statute?
Okay, sure. 1 second. The law of parties, it's really an unjust law. Okay. You can be with somebody and be responsible for a crime that somebody else did. In Texas alone, and it's called a lot of different things for the few states that do have this law, but in Texas, you can be found guilty of a murder in 3 different ways. You can, 1, be the perpetrator who actually commits that act. 2, you can be found guilty under the law of parties if you solicit or encourage or direct or aid or attempt to aid another person who commits murder, or if you fail to make reasonable effort to prevent that murder. This is law of parties statute 7.02a. The 3rd way that you can be found guilty of murder is under the 2nd section of the law of parties, which is the conspirator liability. That's the one that my brother is convicted under. And this is statute 702b. And it states that if in the attempt to carry out a conspiracy to commit one felony, such as robbery, that another felony is committed by one of the conspirators, such as murder, then all of the conspirators are found guilty of the felony actually committed, so robbery and murder, though having no intent to commit it, if the offense was in furtherance of unlawful purpose that was one that should have been anticipated as a result of carrying the conspiracy. So this right there is the actual verbiage in the law that, like I said, it's a poorly written law, and this is kind of what we've been fighting for 25 years is to get this thing rewritten. But the words should have been anticipated. So they basically have to be mind readers. Like I said, in my brother's case, he didn't even know that his co-defendant had a weapon. That was not allowed during the testimony of my brother's trial. However, it was used in order to convict Daniel. Of that murder. So again, should have been anticipated. How do I, or anybody for that matter, know what somebody else intends to do? Even if it was going in to rob a store, right? This was particular case here, but this person, Daniel, that actually decided to do that, he had it in his mind that he was going to do that when he walked in there, and he didn't tell my brother about it. There were 2 other people that knew that he was going to do that, and that was my brother's girlfriend and Daniel's girlfriend, which was my brother's girlfriend's sister. God, it's just a whole nightmare. But the whole point of that is, we have laws that you can be factually guilty, but factually innocent at the same time, because of these poorly written laws like the law parties.
It's pretty,
Did I answer your question?
yes, you did. And it still gets me going. I mean, I still just get curious about all that. So the other question I had, and I think I'm going to have it answered because I'm about to pull that PowerPoint up real quick, because I want everybody to see it. But
Okay.
I was going to ask if did Jeff put his address on there so that people can write to him?
I put his address on there.
I mean,
he didn't, but I did on,
okay.
on the end of the PowerPoint slide with the stuff. And I also put his web addresses to like the web pages that we run for him about case facts and info and news articles and things like that. I also attached that.
Okay, and would it be okay then if I go ahead and put that PowerPoint up in their Slack group? Do y'all
Sure.
use Slack? Okay, yeah, and that way I know that they can answer, and I'm gonna actually upload the video, but I wanna also upload the PowerPoint by itself too, so they can have a look at it if they're in a hurry. But I just wanted to make, so you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen so we can go through this. Carrie, I'm gonna let you narrate it. Well, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, so you don't, I mean, it's fine to say, but I just was, like I said, when I looked at it, you could really see Jeff's growth, and not just what he was making, but the subject matter and things like that, and his landscapes. The landscapes that started happening towards the middle and end were interesting to me. And also when we look at it, how did Jeff get his art supplies? Let's talk about that when we're going through. I mean, how that all worked for him. I'm going to go ahead and share right now so we can have a look.
Okay.
Let's see.
And I'll kind of answer that as we're going through like the different slides. But while you're putting that up, I'll go ahead and Jeff, well, all Texas death row prisoners, they're very limited on the supplies that they get. And they're even more so limited now than they were. Like when Jeff first was on death row, he was at the Ellis unit, which was the old death row. And on the Ellis unit, they weren't in solitary confinement and they had a roommate. So they were with somebody and they got to watch, TV once a week, that they were taken out if they were on good behavior to like, on the weekends to go watch a movie or something. And they were able to make jewelry boxes or wallets with leather goods and, things like that. He made necklaces, like cross necklaces, out of shoestrings that he would buy and take apart. They were not as confined as they are now. Now they're lucky to get color pencils, that they kind of smash up and add water to make like a paint, and they use toothpaste. So it's kind of like a smashed color pencils with toothpaste and water to make the paints that they use. Because they're not allowed colored ink or anything like that. So they get pretty creative in their use. Now they do have some paintbrushes, but all of those supplies come from money that we put on their books and they're allowed to purchase. But that list is constantly updated and they're constantly removing and, other restrictions. For example, like us sending in cards, like we're not allowed to send cards to them anymore, except for like Father's Day, Mother's Day, Christmas. Like there's certain times of year that we can, they've limited, and this has only been in the last couple of years. We have to put everything on white paper. It can't be colored paper anymore. Like there's just so many restrictions, but all of the supplies that he gets, whether it's like the paper for writing letters, he has to buy tablets, he has to buy envelopes, he has to buy stamps, he has to buy, pencils, he has to buy, everything that they get. And that comes from us family members, that are putting money on their accounts.
And I don't know, I think they would do this in the Lubbock County Jail, and they probably do it in the prison system too, where you're buying the supplies, you have to buy it through a specific vendor, and they're always like 10 times higher than they need to be. Like if you went to a cell at Michael's and got that same thing, it would cost, probably half what the other things.
Yeah, and
cost.
sometimes it's 2 to 3 times more
Yeah.
than what you would get. And Michael's is pretty expensive,
Yeah.
but it costs us so much money. Like I can't even tell you how much money, that we've spent over the years. Like, so when I said earlier that, we put ourselves last. Like, I choose not to go to the doctor or take medication so I can make sure that I put a certain amount of money on the books for my brother every month. And now that my kids are grown, because you mentioned and I mentioned, I guess, that my kids started an organization called Kids Against the Death Penalty. So like they were raised in the prison system. They've been visiting my brother since they were babies, and they've grown up in that particular environment. But it's crazy, insane, the amount of time, the amount of money, we live about 6 hours away from my brother. And and especially right now with gas prices the way they are, it's taking us $200 to $300 in gas alone to get there and back. Then we have to, because it's such a long drive, then we have to get a hotel room for the night because there's no way that we can drive there, visit, and then drive back. It's just not feasible. Then we have all of the meals that are outside of there being gone from the house, right? And then we have the snack machines, and we're only allowed to take in $5 per person. So I normally visit with my husband, so I take in 25, he takes in 25. So we don't even get anything for ourselves at those snack machines. We spend all $50 on Jeff at those visits. So he gets like a cold hamburger, or if we're lucky, they have salads left over that you buy from these vending machines. These little salads, they're in a little container that's about like this, and it's $4 for like a little container. And the sandwiches are $4, and the chips are like almost, well, they're $1.50 to $1.75 depending on, they have donuts that should be like 59 cents, but they're $2, right? So like even in these snack machines, we as family members, we get screwed over with money. But for us, it is worth it that he's getting to get something that he doesn't normally get. Like I said, those Johnny bags, they get tired of those. Peanut butter sandwiches and hard-boiled eggs all the time. So, we try to do as much as we can for him there. So, between the money that we put on his books for food and for supplies, when we go visit, we also, spend money there at the prison at those snack machines. So in this PowerPoint that I sent you with his with his works, I did kind of put it in. And there's so many. I have like pages. These are just ones that I happen to have on my phone that I could download really easily. But I haven't taken pictures of everything that he's done. But he, and you could tell his work from 20 years ago via his work today. Because in the cells, they have nothing to do. Like I said, solitary confinement 24 hours a day, almost like 23. They're supposed to be 23 out of the 24. But like I said, it's, they don't get that hour very often anymore. So, when all you have to do is listen to the radio and read or draw, you tend to get better at things. And my brother, he was very lucky to graduate high school. He was an athlete. He was not an academic. And even his knowledge base has increased over this last 25 years of being in there as well. It's not just his art that's gotten better. Like, he has nothing to do but read. And when you read, of course, you increase your
Right.
knowledge. So,
Yeah.
But this particular one that you have showing right there, it was a drawing that he did for his daughter. And this one that's right here,
Mhm.
she's my best friend, and I met her through my brother. So this was something that he did for her birthday. Because her Mickey Mouse is her favorite. She's even got a tattoo of that. So, he did the whole Mickey thing for
They
her.
look really good. And I love all the
But
detail and but these landscapes are intriguing too.
yeah, well, and all of these landscape things that he does, some of his friends, like he has two like long-term pen pals.
Mhm.
One of them is from Norway, and then one of them, like his ex-wife is from Norway, but they are still pen pals and the best of friends. And then he has another one from Switzerland, and so they send him like these pictures from Norway and Switzerland, and it's beautiful, beautiful country over there. And so they'll send him pictures, and then he draws those pictures. So he has something to look at and go by. This is not something that's coming off the top of his head. And he does a few of those, but these are all.
Are these made with the
pictures.
colored pencils and water?
Yes.
Okay. They're really lovely. Is the Norway pen pal Heidi?
No, Heidi has written him a couple of times. Heidi and we've become really good friends. And over the years, we have done this separate thing called Focus on Women. So it's about the women of death row.
Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah. Tell us about
And
that.
so I helped her put together this website that focuses mainly on the women that are death row. There are 6 of them here in Texas. And there's not very many women on death row throughout the United States, but most recently, and of course, I'm sure you've seen this on my Facebook, Jane, all the amount of work that we did on the Melissa Lucio case recently, because she had an execution.
She sure.
Yes, so we came really close with that. So she had an execution scheduled on April the 27th. And for the last 2 months, like before that, we like really hit the ground running on that. So, another one of the cases that we work tirelessly on is the Darlie Routier case. So, I mean, there are 6, like I said, 6 of those women on Texas death row. And so Heidi, who is from Norway, and I work on that together, along with Delia. She's another one. And then Sandrine Skinner, who is from France.
Yeah, and Delia talked to tiniest bit, not enough. I'm so glad you're here, because it seems like it's going to be a pretty good presentation, like holistic, I should say, presentation, because we're getting to see, a lot more information just in the way you guys speak, which is really awesome. But one thing that I can say, and I'm not even comparing them, but that the commitment to the issue is as strong in both of you as it ever has been. And, that's another thing that I think is, unusual and really admirable, because it's hard to be committed to something for 25 years. I mean, day in and day out, right. to be committed to having less, to be second, to pay all the bills, to bring all the money in, to do all that stuff and still have less. That's a commitment. And I think it's important to, for people to understand that it's just a ridiculous situation, and to create, to just all of it, to prevent a murder. I mean, that's basically what it seems like the families are doing. They're on a hamster wheel trying to prevent a murder. And every once in a while they stop the wheel, and it stays like it has for Jeff, and it's going to do for her. But then, like you said, any minute you could become death penalty eligible again. So then the wheel turns back on, and there's this like, and it's really something I want students to understand. Look at these later ones, guys, that how important it is to, if they're willing to help, to write Jeff a letter, to get on the website, to write their congressman a letter, to do anything that will ease it a little bit, or at least let you know that you're being heard, because I think that's important too.
In this last legislative session, because every single legislative session, we enter a law of parties bill. And the bill is typically two parts, because in Texas, you are not ever guaranteed the right to your own trial, ever. Like if you do, or if you commit a crime with somebody, then you're held just as responsible, and they could be sitting right next to you. So like, for instance, in the law of parties case with Kenneth Foster, the reason that he was, or got clemency was because he didn't have his own trial. He was at the trial with his co-defendant, who was actually guilty of murder. So he was literally sitting in the chair right next to him. And so they thought that he was a murderer too, because he was sitting right next to the murderer. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
The law of parties bills that we do are two parts. One, should try and guarantee that everybody has the right to their own trial. And two, we're not saying get rid of the law of parties altogether. What we're saying is get rid of the penalty as it applies to the law of parties. So if it is supposed to be reserved for the worst of the worst, how is it the worst of the worst if you didn't factually kill anybody, or plan to kill anybody, or conspire, right? So in this last legislative session, we got that bill passed with only 6 people voting against it. Like we had.
Oh, that's great though.
I know. So like back in 2009, when we did it, we barely got it passed, But then Governor Perry, he threatened to veto it because, he was up for reelection, and he did not want anything. Like he was okay with part 1, which is why he granted clemency. But he did not want to take away from the death penalty at all, even if it was for those people who were innocent. So we had to have people rewrite that and then submit it back. So like we got it past the House of Representatives, but then it's got to go to the other side. So it's got to go to the senators, right? And so the Senate had read it, like the new law of parties bill, but it did not get read on time. Like they have to have multiple readings, and so it didn't get read on time in the last day. And so it fizzled out. And this time it was the same thing. Like we got it past the House of Representatives, like I said, with overwhelming support. And that's thanks to Jeff Leach, who is a Republican, but he is like been my brother's champion, and with him, because I write every single legislative session, I make one letter, and I just address it to to the different people, but it's the same letter that I send to every single one of them. And like on my kids' site, and which is really easy, for the Kids Against the Death Penalty, they have every single legislative session. So you click on their picture and it takes you to their webpage and you can email them. So we have it up where we just write one letter and each of us will just click on the picture and send that particular letter. But normally these politicians, they don't read their own letters. They have and we call them, they're gatekeepers, right? But he was on vacation in Florida and they happened to have a hurricane while he was, there. And so they couldn't go out. And he decided to read his own email. And he read my email and he called me from his vacation in Florida and we had several hour conversation. And then he called and spoke with my parents, and, he is a lawyer himself. So he really looked into that particular, into the case and into like Danny's case as well to find other evidence. So like Representative Leach has really been working with us to, try and help reform this law, and it's so appreciated. He was also the champion here recently for Melissa Lucio, and he's the reason that her execution was stopped as well. Like,
well,
because
I'm super glad to hear that because it helps me think not all Republicans are bad.
Right.
You
Well,
know, I
you know,
mean, because they're a lot of times so conservative, and I'm not trying to slight all Republicans. I'm just saying, like Abbott, well, like Perry, for example, doesn't he hold a record for executions?
mhm.
I mean, it's like
Yes, he did, over
300 something
200.
people he murdered, you know, so it's kind
I
of
don't
like,
know the exact number, but I know it's over 200 for Perry alone.
yeah, so, you know, I mean, there's, it's sometimes hard to, you know, to kind of reconcile that. So it's really nice to know that Congressman Leach understands, in other words, it's not, he sees it as a legal and a moral issue rather than a political issue. Or it appears that way if he's getting involved, you know, that the law is misinformed. And often, we both know this, laws are interpreted the way people want to interpret it.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, you know, people get around stuff like having Kenneth Foster, for example, sit next to the other defendant. I mean, those kinds of things play a psychological role and tilt in and then, you know, of course, systemic policy and stuff like that. But anyway, I'm glad I might have to write him a letter myself and thank him for.
Yeah, he is such an amazing person. Like I adore him.
That's
He
really
is
great.
just,
He's the only,
you
he's
know,
really given me, that gives me some faith in him.
well, you know, and his whole little board that he's got going on there, other Republicans, and you know, it's kind of given me hope again because you know that I was
Yeah.
Republican my entire life, and I even voted for Perry once, never do it again. But you know, over my lifetime, and I'm almost 50, but when I first started voting, I myself was unfortunately Republican, you know, but we all learn.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, in the beginning, though, we got to remember that it was a philosophical difference. Yeah, it was a different ball game. It wasn't so extreme, you know. So I mean, you know, and there's those. I kind of feel sorry for some of those other Republicans that are, you know, like poor old what's her name, Kellyanne Conway's husband or something. I mean, you know, I have some empathy for that. But yeah, before it was a little bit different. It was a philosophical belief in the way government should run, basically.
Right.
You know, and so states versus feds. So, you know, but that's not the case anymore, unfortunately.
Right. And limited government. They've just taken these cases like the death penalty or abortion or, you know, and they've like take these causes, and now it's not even about limited government or state and federal. It's, you know, these particular issues, and that's it, you know.
Yeah, it's
just
about control, actually. I think, you know, I
Yes.
think the extremes have taken over the Republican Party, and that's why it's doing. I mean, I just read an article that Amy Barrett was living in this cult, this religious cult. Did you read that when she was in college? It's a very interesting article. I'm going to find it. But I mean, it's definitely influenced. She met her husband in that, you know, it's like this whole kind of extremism of the evangelical kind of, and none of that belongs in government. It really doesn't. I mean, people, anybody extreme doesn't belong in government. And if they're extreme in their belief system, you know, if they're extreme in their belief system, then they are extreme. And to think that that's separate from the way that they're acting in the court right now is just lunacy. It really, I mean, like Clarence Thomas's wife, are you kidding? I mean, like, I know we can't get on that thing, but it just like totally blows my socks off. Anyway, back to Jeff, is that just quickly, are these still the colored pencils and water and toothpaste? These later ones?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the later ones are.
They are really beautiful. And that's exactly why I want to make sure and share that in my classroom, so that if a student can be, you know, can click on it, it's very easy to see. And then I'll give them a note to also. But this is Jeff's address right here.
Did you see the two that he did for my birthday? Like, yes. I love them so much. They're framed and hanging up in my, you know, because
Yeah, they're
I'm
just
old school goth, right? So
Yeah.
these are my little goth girl.
I love this one.
And oh yeah, that's the last one.
Gorgeous.
That's kind of where he's at right now.
I
So
actually love the
as a
detail in that, that's what's so, it's not just the detail of what the content is, but it's the detail in the way he's moving the pencils.
Did you see the drawing that he did of Adele? He did that for one of his pen pals.
Yeah.
The one yeah.
It's gorgeous.
So yeah.
Yeah, but I actually, it's just, I'm very interested in the lines, but I think the ones he did for you have more line detail in them actually, but this one's still just absolutely stunning. And, the landscapes are too. So you guys, if you have a chance and, I probably will offer him an extra credit to write him a letter and give them some support and have a, reach out, because a lot of times people will write back. And that's a nice feeling to know, that a pen pal starts. So think about that. And then here's his website. And
Yeah,
there's two of them. Yeah. So make sure, that's another reason just to load the PowerPoint too, is if someone wants to stick around and look at that more. So that's it, guys. And I'm just so thankful that I'm getting to actually have Terry, because I'm going to photograph her very soon. Hopefully the 1st of August, if you're available, because I'll be in a great place to not have anything that's holding me in one spot. And then we can and I would love to record a little story. Let me stop the recording. All right, guys, listen, thanks very much. And I'm going to stop this recording. Okay, somewhere.